Hi, wonderful people. I'm Leah Rapaner. As a sociologist, University of Melbourne professor, founder of the Gender Equity Initiative, director of the Future of Work Lab, woman, wife, and mother, I've made it my life's mission to take down every ridiculous gender myth out there. Together, we'll deep dive into the research to get to the bottom of all these misperceptions that are holding all of us back. Don't worry, I've studied these types of questions for decades, and after publishing countless articles exactly on these topics, I know when they are nonsense or real truths. And I'm going to help you learn that too. So here we go. Let's do it. This is Misperceived. In your household, who's in charge of phone calls to the parents, to the grandparents, to aunties and uncles? Who's in charge of making sure everyone's invited to, say, Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving or 4th of July? Who in your family, or if you aren't partnered when you were a kid, who was in charge of making sure that, you wrote your thank you notes, or that everyone got the birthday invite, or that everyone felt included in every single event? I'm going to bet you're thinking that it was probably mom, or if you are a mother or a woman, that it's you. The question on this episode is, who's in charge of keeping the family together? Is it a misperception, in fact, that women are in charge of keeping the family together? Or is this true? I'm going to talk to you today about an article by Micah Honstra and Katya Ivanova, and it's Kinkeeping Across Families, the central role of mothers and stepmothers in the facilitation of adult intergenerational ties. And this was published in Sex Roles in 2023. In our research, what we're hearing a lot when we're doing our research on the mental load is that mothers disproportionately are responsible for keeping track of their children's lives. They are there making sure their kids have play dates. They are there organizing, family events. They're making sure that the family sticks together and binds together in these really interesting ways. Well, I shouldn't say interesting ways. Very important, but also intense and draining ways. And so mothers have stepped into this role of being the kin keeper as the mother for their kids, and then for their family and their extended family, including their partner's family. And this is draining their mental load. Now, there's a lot of research looking at the role of mothers as kin keepers, or this person who is in charge of maintaining all the connections between family members. It is usually mothers. But this article is asking, what happens as people become adults? What happens within adult family relationships? Not just a mom organizing the play dates for their kids. And we will do a whole episode on that once my book Trained comes out next year, and we can talk to you about what we're finding in the research about that. But they're asking, what happens amongst adult children and their adult parents? And who's in charge of kin keeping in that dynamic? And so they're building upon this kind of this deep literature that's looking at who within the family is in charge of maintaining the family, who's in charge of buying birthday presents, who's in charge of spreading news, who's in charge of representing the family, who's in charge of organizing the outings. And we know that a lot of this stuff requires a lot of work, but it also is critical to keeping the family together. It's critical to the solidarity, and someone has to step into this role because it helps maintain the ties across the family. Research shows that usually this person in the family is the woman. It is the mother. I'm going to do a side note. We think about it being mothers who are doing this work, but I have seen or read a lot about this being the oldest sister too, right? Do older sisters step into that kin-keeping role for the family? If you like that, send us through some info to our @Misperceived podcast Instagram handle, because we can do a whole episode about this. What does that look like? So share through. And this is because women tend to be kind of that default person that they step into that role without any realization, but there is social norms that exist that expect women to be in charge of family dynamics, the emotional work that goes into that. One of their kind of interesting things was what happens when parents divorce? Okay, so if you're in this heterosexual family and you know that mothers are more likely to step into the kin-keeping role, what happens when the parents divorce? Does the dad step in divorced families? Does that actually, the absence of the mother, the mother in the marital union, does that mean that the dads do more work? And then what happens when the dad remarries? Does the stepmother step into that role, right? And again, they're looking at adult children, like in these adult children dynamics. And they're asking, who does the kin keeping if you have couples that stay together? So with their adult kids, if they've divorced and the dad is now solo, and then what happens when he repartners with a new wife? There's a credible amount of adult emotional energy that's being invested in this, and that this is going to impact adult dynamics probably more when you have power, control, autonomy than maybe when you were a kid and you just went where the adults told you. And one of the things they talk about is that this kin-keeping work is really hidden work. It's invisible work, but it's highly, highly emotional. And in particular, it's tied to what it looks like to be, say, a good mother or a good woman, and it's tied to these social norms. And so what do they find? Okay, well, they're taking data from the Netherlands, and this is coming from this OKIN survey. I won't read it to you, but it's in Dutch, but it's basically parents and children in the Netherlands. And what they're saying is they basically had this survey of 25 to 45-year-old adults who are living in the Netherlands, and they conducted the survey in 2017 and then repeated it in 2020. So they have this longitudinal data looking at people over time. And they analyzed the data for people with looking at the parent figures. They had about 5,400 parents, including 13% who are continuously married. Those are people who, are married to their woman partner. These are heterosexual couples. 16% who are continuously partnered mothers, repartnered fathers, repartnered mothers, stepfathers, and stepmothers. And they're looking at who is responsible for the 4 types of kin-keeping activities. 1, buying birthday presents on behalf of the household. 2, organizing family outings. 3, relaying family news and messages. And 4, discussing family problems. And what they basically are doing is they ask these adult children which of their parents are doing the following of those tasks for them, which are most involved. And they ask them on the scale of it's almost always my father or my new partner of my mother to it's almost always my mother or the new partner of my father. And so they're asking this who's responsible for doing this for you? So what are they finding in the results? Well, basically, if you are a mother and you're in this kind of partnership with the biological father, you do way more of this kin-keeping work, right? If you divorce, those mothers still keep that pretty high kin-keeping work, right? They're still doing that work. Mothers are going to do a certain level of kin-keeping work for their kids no matter what, whether they're with the partner, the biological father, or if they're divorced. Stepmothers come in third. They're the second most frequent. They do the third highest amount of kin-keeping work for their non-biological adult children. So pretty much mothers are holding this labor across these 3 groups. What does it look like for the fathers? Well, basically fathers who are married to the biological mother do the least, followed by stepfathers. They're kind of similar to those fathers in the biological family. But if the parents divorce and therefore the father is alone and unremarried, he does a lot more. He still doesn't do as much as mothers are doing, but he's doing a lot more than fathers who have a heterosexual partner, either a biological mother or a stepmother in the home. She's absorbing that work. He's stepping out of that work. But here's the catch. That work is what connects you emotionally to your biological children or to your stepchildren, right? That's the work that when they go on later in the study, they find is building emotional connection between parents and adult children. And so if those fathers are stepping out, they're not getting that benefit of being connected to their kids. And what a loss to them, right? That's a loss in terms of intimacy and connection and looking back on your life. What do you want? You want to be connected to your kids. Men sometimes find this difficult to access. Let me give you the 5 things they do. Buy them birthday presents, help organize family outings, tell them information and messages, and discuss family problems. Those are the 5 things in this kin-keeping sample that teams seem to, are examples of ways you could connect in with your kids. And the result of that is you'll feel more connected to your kids. The other thing I want to note is that we have this cultural narrative about stepmothers being step monsters. Now, I know many of you have step parents who are absolute assholes. And as I've said in the past, jerks know no gender. And so I want to validate that experience. If you had a step parent who was isolating or cold, emotionally manipulative, fill in the blanks, I am very, very sorry. And you absolutely did not deserve that. I mean that. You did not deserve that. Those people were jerks. But if you had a stepmother or a stepfather who really was emotionally connected to you, I think that stereotype about step parents being cold or stepmothers being step monsters is really detrimental to their identity, to your experience, and it doesn't fit our cultural narrative. The good news is that the world is big enough that we can have both experiences. And so I want to say to you, what's showing through this research is that the stepmothers are really stepping in on average in these families to help do the kinkeeping for the kids. And the result of that is those stepmothers are feeling more emotionally connected to their children. So if you had a stepmother who was this type of stepmother, I want to acknowledge that too and say to you that narrative of them being a step monster is garbage. Jerks know no gender. And stepmothers aren't inherently cold and manipulative and monsters. They look at one more thing too. They're curious about whether if you do that kinkeeping work, right? Like if you do that work of buying presents and checking in and sharing information and making phone calls, do you have greater emotional closeness to the child? Do your kids say that they appreciate that? The answer is yes. It is actually work that is binding everyone together. And it's binding the children, the adult children, to the step parents too, right? So this is work that when done breeds emotional closeness between parents and children. It is coming for everyone, right? That work is valued work. It benefits men. If men do that work, their kids feel closer to them. They feel more connected, and they will feel more connected even when they're in the stepfather role, right? Like if men are in the stepfather role, or they are the father, or they're married to the current mother, doing the kinkeeping work is work that then adult children feel like breeds or brings emotional closeness to the parent. So, is it in fact a misperception that women are the kin keepers of the family? Not at all. Actually, the research is showing across. I feel like I said it 17 times. Mothers step into this kin keeping role. They tend to do this labor. It's important to know that this is work, right? This is not easy work. It can be time-consuming work. You have to better understand the personalities and the dynamics of the family. It is work, but it brings emotional connection. If you're partnered with in heterosexual unions, then the men step out of the work. They kind of get absolved of that. But what a shame, actually, because they lose out on being emotionally connected to their children. It's actually a loss to men to not be doing that work. And if you step in, you end up getting that closeness. We see that stepmothers are stepping in, and I just want to say I see you. I see the work you're doing. We've heard it in our interviews. We know that this is both beneficial work to the family, but also is taking a toll in many circumstances on you. And I just think that stereotype of stepmothers being awful is really detrimental to the incredible work that stepmothers and stepparents do for the family. So let us know what you think about this one. Short, sweet, just wanted to let you know. Men, do more kinkeeping work. Full stop. End of story. We'd love to hear from you at Misperceived Podcast on our Instagram. I have at Prof. Leah too on Instagram, as per always. Thank you for listening to Misperceived, where you don't need a PhD, but you just get to come hang out with me. Mwah! This podcast was produced with the support of the incredible Sophie Squires, the wonderful Kate Danger, the fantastic Rich Berner, and the one and only, the best ever made, Serena Reagan. I would like to acknowledge that our podcast is recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people listening today.